I have buried calves in spring snow with my bare hands. I have pulled a man out from under a rolled truck and felt his ribs give like wet kindling. I am not a soft person, and I won't pretend to be one for the sake of a story. But I have never, before or since, seen anything that broke me open the way a stranger in a back alley did on the 24th of December, when the temperature was 11 below and falling, and the whole town had its lights on and its doors shut. People always want the part where I saved her. They lean in for it. They want the warm part, the part you can wrap a bow around. What they don't understand, what took me a long time to understand myself, is that I didn't have the first idea who saved who. I keep a little notebook in my coat. I've written things down my whole life, dates and weather and how many head I lost, because my memory is a liar and ink isn't. I went back through it last week. The entry for that night is 4 words long, in handwriting I don't recognize as my own steady hand. It says found someone, brought her home. That's all I could manage that night. Everything else I'm about to tell you, I had to learn, and the learning of it cost me more than I expected to pay. So sit down. Let the fire do its work. This one doesn't tie off clean, and I won't insult you by pretending it does. The dog found her first. I want that on the record, because everybody in town tells it like I'm some kind of hero with a sixth sense, and the truth is I'd have walked right past that alley if Boone hadn't planted himself at the mouth of it and refused to move. Boone is a 14-year-old blue heeler with one cataract eye and a temperament that ranges from indifferent to mildly insulted. He does not stop for things. He certainly doesn't stop for strangers. He'd watch the house burn down before he'd alert me to it. So when he locked up on the icy sidewalk with his ears forward and made a sound I'd only ever heard him make at a downed fence with a coyote on the other side, I stopped too. I'd come into town for a fan belt and a fifth of something to get me through the holiday, which I was spending alone, same as the 4 before it. The hardware store was closing early on account of the cold. The whole of Main Street was that particular kind of quiet you only get when it's truly dangerous out, not festive quiet, not peaceful, but the silence of a place where every living thing with sense has gone inside. The streetlights had those frozen halos around them. My breath was coming back at me in clouds. I remember the cold had gotten into my back teeth. The alley ran between the shuttered diner and the building that used to be a feed store and is now nothing. There was a dumpster, a stack of broken pallets, and a dark shape against the brick that my eyes wanted very badly to read as a pile of trash bags. It wasn't trash bags. I want to tell you I knew right away it was a person. I didn't. I think some animal part of me knew and the rest of me argued because the rest of me did not want it to be true. Nobody is out here. It's Christmas Eve. It's 11 below. The thing against the wall didn't move and I stood there with the cold in my teeth and my dog growling low, and I'll be honest with you because there's no point otherwise, I almost turned around. That's the part I never tell at the diner. There was a second where I almost left. Then the shape shifted, just barely, the way a person shifts when they've stopped shivering. And if you know anything about cold, you know that's the bad sign. That's not relief. That's the body giving up the fight, and my feet were moving before my head had finished the thought. She was wedged into the corner where the dumpster met the wall, knees to her chest, arms wrapped around herself over a coat that was the wrong coat, a thin denim thing, a spring coat, a coat for a different and kinder month. No hat, no gloves, sneakers, canvas ones, soaked through and stiff. Her hair had frozen where it touched the brick. She had a backpack clutched against her stomach like it was the last warm thing in the world, and maybe to her it was. I got down on my knees on the ice. "Hey," I said, "hey now look at me." Her eyes came open. They were slow about it and they didn't track right at first, and that scared me worse than anything. A person who's just cold looks at you. A person who's freezing to death looks through you, at something a long way off. "You can't sleep here," I said, which was a stupid thing to say, but you say stupid things. "You hear me? You can't sleep, stay with me." Her lips moved. No sound. Then, on the second try, in a voice that came out cracked and far away and strangely polite, "I'm okay, I'm just resting." I have thought about those 3 words 10,000 times. I'm just resting. She was dying against a wall and she was managing my feelings about it. She was trying not to be a bother. I got my arms under her, and she was lighter than she had any right to be. Light in the way that told its own story about how long it had been since she'd eaten. And she made a small sound of protest. And her hand came up, not to push me away, I realized, but to grab the backpack tighter, to make sure it came too. "I got it," I said. "I got the bag, it's coming, you just hang on." My truck was half a block off. Boone trotted ahead of us the whole way, looking back over his shoulder, and I swear that dog has never moved with such purpose in his life. I got her into the passenger seat and cranked the heat all the way up, and her teeth started chattering again as the warm air hit her, which a man at the VFW once told me is actually the body deciding it's worth trying after all, and I held on to that. I drove with one hand and kept the other on her shoulder, talking, just talking, anything, the price of fan belts, the names of my horses, the weather forecast nonsense, because I needed her to keep hearing a voice, and I needed to keep hearing one too. Here's where you'd expect me to say I drove her to the hospital. The county hospital was 40 minutes out on roads that were a sheet of glass, in a truck with a fan belt I'd come to town to replace because the old one was screaming. My ranch was 11 minutes the other direction. I made a decision. I've spent years wondering if it was the right one. I'm still not sure. I took her home. By the time we pulled up to the house, she was talking a little, which I took for a good sign and which I now know was probably the cold making her loose-tongued and strange. She told me her name was, well, she told me a name. I'll get to that. She asked me if I was real. She asked it plainly, the way you'd ask the time. "Are you real?" she said. "Or is this the part where I freeze and dream something nice?" "I'm real," I said. "I got a busted fan belt and a dog who doesn't like me to prove it." She laughed. It was barely anything, a puff of air, but it was a laugh. And I'd never been so glad to hear a sound in my life. "I'll tell you what I did, because I read once what you're supposed to do, and I did most of it wrong, but I did it. I got her inside. I did not put her in front of the fire. That's the mistake everybody makes. You warm the skin too fast and it does something cruel to the heart. I got the wet clothes off her, and I'll say only that I did it the way you'd undress an injured stranger, with my eyes somewhere else and a blanket going on as fast as the wet came off. And if you want to make something ugly out of that, then you and I have nothing further to discuss. I wrapped her in every dry blanket in the house and a wool sweater of mine and the dog, who lay down against her back without being asked, which he has never done for me. I made the sweetest, weakest tea I could and held the cup while she sipped because her hands shook too hard to hold it. I kept the room warm but not hot. I sat up with her. She faded in and out for the first hour. In one of the lucid stretches, she looked around my front room, the antlers, the bad taxidermy, the framed picture of my late wife on the mantel that I keep meaning to take down and never do, and she said, "Whose house is this?" "Mine." "Where's your family?" I looked at the picture. "It's just me," I said, "and the dog, and about 60 head of cattle who'd sell me out for a bale of hay." She was quiet a while. Then, "Why'd you stop in the alley? Nobody stops." And I didn't have a good answer, so I gave her the true one. "Boone stopped," I said. "I just followed the dog." She fell asleep. Real sleep, not the other kind, I could tell by the breathing. I sat in the chair across from her with my notebook open on my knee, and I tried to write down what had happened, and that's the night I told you about, where all I could manage was 4 words. Found someone. Brought her home. My hand wouldn't do more than that. I kept looking over to make sure her chest was still rising. Around 2 in the morning, she said something in her sleep. I didn't catch most of it, but I caught a name, a child's name, said the way you say a name when you're reaching for someone, and I caught the word sorry, said over and over, and I sat there in the dark with the fire ticking down and understood that whatever had put her in that alley, it wasn't a simple thing, and it wasn't going to be a simple thing to be a part of. Here is what I knew about her by sunrise on Christmas morning: that she was alive, that her name might be the one she gave me and might not, that she carried a backpack like it held her whole life, and maybe it did, that she said sorry in her sleep to someone small. Here is what I did not know, and would not know for days, and which I am still, in some private place, not finished forgiving myself for the way I learned it. I did not know what she was running from. I did not know it was still coming. And I did not know that I was about to be made to choose between the warm, easy thing and the right one. And that, unlike in the stories they tell at the diner, those two would turn out not to be the same thing at all. The dog had moved up onto the couch in the night. He was watching her sleep with his one good eye. When the sun came up over the ridge and put a long gold bar of light across the floor, she stirred and her eyes came open. And this time they found me and they tracked, clear and frightened and alive. "You're still here," she said. "Where else would I be?" I said. I didn't know yet that the question would turn around on me. That before this was over, she'd be the one deciding whether to stay or go, and I'd be the one in the cold, hopping somebody stopped. Her name was Della. I'll use it now because by the third day she decided to trust me with the real one, and a thing somebody trusts you with you don't go back on. Took her 2 days to be able to stand without the room tilting. The cold had nipped 2 fingertips on her left hand and the side of 1 foot, not the deep black kind that costs you the part, thank God, but the angry, blistered, screaming nerve kind that meant she spent a lot of those first days with her jaw clenched and her eyes wet, refusing to make a sound about it. That was the first thing I learned about her that wasn't a fact but a quality. She would rather hurt in silence than ask for help. She apologized for everything, for the blankets, for the tea, for existing in my front room. When I changed the dressings on her foot, she'd say, I'm sorry, with every wince, and I finally said, if you apologize to me one more time, I'm putting you back in the alley, which was a cruel joke and exactly the wrong one, and she went white, and I felt like the lowest thing that ever walked. That was a stupid thing to say, I told her. I'm sorry, I'm not good at this. I've been alone a long while. She studied me for a second. Then she said, me too, and something settled between us, a kind of truce of the lonely. I'm not going to pretend I pieced her whole story together in one sitting. It came out the way water comes through a cracked dam, a little here, a pressure jet there, sometimes all at once when she couldn't hold it back, then nothing for half a day. But here's the shape of it, the way I came to know it. Della had a daughter, 6 years old. The name she'd said in her sleep, Junie. Della had been 24 when Junie was born, and the man involved was the kind of man that other men nod about knowingly, and women learn to fear in a specific, full-body way. I won't catalog what he did to her. She told me some of it, and I will carry it, and I will not pass it on for entertainment. The short version is that she'd finally run. Packed what fit in a backpack, took Junie and run. 3 states and a bus and a borrowed car and then no car, working under-the-table jobs, staying ahead of him, staying invisible, because invisible was the only safe thing to be. And then, and this is the part where her voice would go flat and careful, the way people talk about the thing that actually broke them, Junie had gotten sick. A fever that wouldn't quit. Della had no insurance, no fixed address, no money, and a bone-deep terror that the second she walked into an emergency room and gave a real name, the system would light up and he would find them because he had people. He always had people. He'd found them twice before. So she'd waited 2 days, hoping it would break on its own. It didn't break on its own. Junie was alive. I need to say that right now, because Della told it in a way that made my heart stop, and I won't do that to you. Junie was alive. But waiting those 2 days had turned a thing that was simple into a thing that wasn't, and Junie had ended up in a hospital after all, a children's hospital in the city, 200 miles east, and the moment they admitted her, the machinery of the world had done exactly what Della feared, flagged the name. Pulled the records, and put a social worker, and eventually a man's lawyer into the conversation about where this child was going to live. Della had been declared, in the eyes of a court she couldn't afford to fight, an unfit and absent mother. She'd missed the hearing. She'd missed it because she was hitchhiking back across 200 miles of December to get to her daughter, and the ride fell through in our town, and the next one didn't come and the cold did. And that is the chain of small, ordinary failures that ends with a woman freezing to death in an alley 3 blocks from a church with the lights on. Junie was being released into temporary custody. Not to him, Della was clear on that. It was the one mercy. The court hadn't given the child to him, not with his record, but to the state into a placement. And there was a window, a narrow legal window, in which Della could appear and contest it. And if she missed that window too, the temporary would start hardening into permanent, and she would have to fight her way back to her own child through years of a system that had already written her down as the villain. The window closed on December 29th. A hearing, 200 miles east. She had to be in that room. That was Christmas Day when I understood the shape of it. The 29th was 4 days out. And here is where the easy story and the true one part ways. The easy story is, Cowboy drives the brave mother to the city, she walks into the courtroom, justice is done, music swells. I'd have given anything for that to be the story. But Della was not, that Christmas, a woman who could walk into a courtroom. She could barely walk to the bathroom. Her foot was a horror. She was running a low fever of her own. And more than the body, her mind was a wrecked thing those first days. She'd swing from a furious, clawing need to leave right now, to leave on a foot that couldn't bear weight, to crawl 200 miles if she had to, all the way down to a black flat stillness where she'd say things like, "Junie's bet her off. Look at me. Who'd give a kid to me?" And I'd watch the fight go out of her, and that frightened me more than the fever did. A body you can warm up. I didn't know how to warm up that. And there was the other thing. The thing I'd sensed that first night and pushed down. It was still coming. On the second day, while she slept, I'd done what any person would do. I'd looked through the front of her backpack for a phone, a contact, anybody I could call to help, and I'd found a folded court paper and a cheap prepaid phone, dead. And when I charged it and it came on, it lit up with messages. Not from a friend, from him. He'd gotten the number somehow. He knew she was contesting. The messages were the kind that don't threaten in words a court would care about, but that make the hair stand up on your arms anyway. The kind that end with "I'll see you on the 29th. I'm looking forward to it." He was going to be in that courtroom. And he had a lawyer and a clean shirt and a story and standing in the community. And she had a frostbitten foot, a backpack, and a cowboy she'd known for 3 days. This is the morally heavy part. And I'm going to lay it out honest, because the whole point of telling you any of this is that I refuse to make myself look better than I was. On the night of the 26th, Della was asleep, and I sat at my kitchen table with that dead then living phone and the court paper and a cup of coffee going cold, and I thought a thought I'm ashamed of. I thought I could just not tell her about the messages. I thought I could let the 29th pass, tell her the roads were closed, tell her we couldn't make it. Keep her here, safe, warm, where he can't get at her, where the court can't grind her up, where she'll heal, and in a few weeks or months when she's strong we'll figure out a better way, a safer way, a way that doesn't put her in a room with that man and a system that's already decided against her. I want you to understand how reasonable that felt at 2 in the morning. It felt like protecting her. It felt like the warm, kind thing. And the truth underneath it, the part I didn't want to look at, was that some piece of me, some lonely, selfish piece I'm not proud of, didn't want her to go. Didn't want the house to be just me and the dog again. Had gotten used in 3 days to a second cup at the table. I dressed it up as her safety. But a lie is a lie even when it's wearing a Sunday coat. And the lie I was building was one where I decided, for a grown woman, that she shouldn't go fight for her own child. I sat with that until the coffee was stone cold. Then I got up and I went into the front room and I woke her and I put the phone in her hand and I showed her the messages, all of them, and I showed her the date on the court paper and I said, "He's going to be there. And the roads are bad and your foot's bad and the whole thing's stacked against you, and I can't promise you it'll go right. But it's yours to decide, not mine." I almost made it mine. I want you to know I almost did." She read the messages. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were dry, and they were the clearest I'd seen them. She read them twice. And then she looked up at me and she said the thing that I keep in the front of my notebook now, where I'll see it every day for the rest of my life. She said, "I've been letting people decide for me my whole life. Him, the court, the cold." She folded the phone shut. "I'm going to that hearing. I'd rather lose her in a room where I showed up than keep her in one where I didn't." Then she looked down at her ruined foot, and the fear came back into her face, just for a second, human and honest. "I just don't know if I can stand up long enough to do it." And that was the moment the easy story died for good, and the real one started, because the question stopped being would she go and became what would it cost to get her there standing. 4 days, 200 miles of ice, a foot that couldn't bear weight, a man in a clean shirt, and the two of us who 3 days before had been strangers, sitting at a kitchen table at 3 in the morning, working out whether a miracle could be built out of a busted truck, a stubborn woman, and whatever I had left to give. I didn't tell her the other thing I was thinking. I still haven't told her. I'll tell you, because you're a stranger and that's easier. I was thinking that I'd spent 5 years deciding nothing was worth the trouble of caring about. And here it was, the trouble, asleep on my couch with a dog against her back, and I was so grateful for it I could barely breathe, and so afraid of what it was going to cost. We left at 4 in the morning on the 28th to give ourselves a full day of margin, because I have lived through enough winters to know that the ice doesn't care about your court date. The fan belt, the one I'd gone to town for in the first place. The night this whole thing started, I'd fixed it by lantern light in the barn the day before, fingers gone stupid with cold, Boone watching from a hay bale. And there's a joke in there about how the errand that put me in that alley was the one that finally got used. But I was too tired to laugh at it then, and I'm not much for laughing at it now. Della came out to the truck on a crutch I'd made her from a busted rake handle and a wad of fleece, and I want to tell you about how she got into that truck because it's the truest picture of her I have. Every step on that foot cost her. I could see it costing her. And she didn't make a sound, and she didn't let me carry her, and when I moved to help she said, "I have to be able to do this myself in front of the judge. Let me practice." So I let her practice. I walked beside her with my hands half up like a man spotting a tightrope, and she crossed 40 feet of frozen yard on her own power, and it took her a long time, and it was the bravest thing I have ever watched a person do, and there was no music. Just her breathing and the crutch creaking and the dog's nails on the ice. The drive was 11 hours of what should have been 4. I won't narrate every mile. The mountains tried to kill us twice. There was a stretch near the pass where the road was a mirror and a jackknife semi had it down to 1 lane, and we sat for 90 minutes with the heater roaring and Della's leg up on the dash. And I watched her watch the clock, and I watched her not panic, visibly choosing not to panic, her thumb worrying a frayed spot on her jeans, and I thought about how a person learns to do that, to keep the fear in a box. And I thought about what it must have taken to learn it, and I had to look back at the road. We talked in that truck, more than 2 people who have known each other 5 days ought to be able to. She told me about Junie, how she laughed, how she was scared of the dark but pretended not to be, how she'd lost a front tooth and was furious the tooth fairy hadn't found them at the motel, and how Della had slipped $2 under the pillow herself, and Junie had looked at her funny like she half knew. She told me Junie liked horses, drew them constantly. Couldn't draw them well, they came out like dogs with long faces, but drew them anyway, dozens of them, and Della had a few folded in the backpack, and she took one out and unfolded it and smoothed it on her knee and looked at it the whole way through the pass. I told her about my wife. First time I'd talked about her to anyone in 5 years. I won't put that here. Some things you take out for one person in one truck and then you fold them back up. But I'll say that by the time we came down out of the mountains and saw the city lights spread out gold and electric across the dark, I'd said her name out loud and the sky hadn't fallen, and Della had reached over and squeezed my arm once, hard, and let go, and that was the whole of it, and it was enough. We got a motel near the courthouse. 2 rooms, I want that clear, 2 rooms, I'm not building anything here it wasn't. She barely slept. I heard her up and packing on the bad foot through the wall, practicing, I think, practicing crossing a room. In the morning I bought her the only thing I could find open that fit. A plain dark dress from a drugstore rack, and a pair of flat shoes a size too big that we stuffed with tissue so the bad foot didn't scream. And she stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself like she was looking at a stranger, and she said, "I don't look like a fit mother." "You look," I said, "like a woman who drove through a mountain to be here. Let them make of that what they want." The hearing. I wasn't allowed in for the heart of it. I sat on a wooden bench in a hallway that smelled of floor wax and old coffee, and I held the backpack on my knees and I waited, and Boone wasn't there, but I found myself reaching down for him out of habit and touching nothing. He came in. The man. I knew him the second I saw him because he was exactly what she described, and somehow worse for being ordinary, clean shirt, good coat, a lawyer at his elbow, a way of moving through the building like he owned the deed to it. He didn't look at me. I was furniture to him. He looked at the courtroom door like it was a thing he'd already won, and I sat on my hands because I have a temper, and this was the one place on earth where my temper could only hurt her. I don't know everything that happened in that room. I know it ran long. I know that at one point the door opened, and a woman in a cardigan, the social worker, came out and made a call in the hall and went back in, and I couldn't read her face. I know that the man's lawyer came out once and smiled at his phone in a way that put my heart in my boots. And I know that after 2 hours and 40 minutes, the door opened, and Della came out on her rake-handle crutch, and I could not read her face either, and I stood up so fast the backpack hit the floor, and neither of us said anything for a second that lasted a year. I'm going to tell you what she told me in the hallway, and then I'm going to stop, because the rest belongs to her, and to a 6-year-old who draws horses that look like dogs. She told me the court had not given Junie back to her. Not that day. Not clean, not with music. What the court had done because she'd shown up, because she'd contested, because a stranger had charged a phone, and a woman had crossed a mountain on a ruined foot to be in a room, was declined to make it permanent. The man got nothing. His record saw to that, and it turned out the social worker in the cardigan had been doing her own quiet looking and didn't like what she'd found about him either. Junie would stay for now in the temporary placement, a foster family, decent people, the social worker said, people who'd let Della visit. And there was a path, a long one. Supervised visits, then unsupervised, a list of things Della had to do, an apartment, a job, time, proof. Months of it, maybe more than a year. She had not won her daughter back. She had won the right to fight for her daughter in the open with her name attached, no longer running, no longer invisible. The thing she'd been most afraid of being seen had turned out to be the only door out. "I get to see her Saturday," Della said. Her voice did a thing then, finally cracked clean through after holding for 5 days and 200 miles. Supervised. An hour. I get to see her Saturday. And she put her face against my coat and she shook, and it wasn't the cold this time. And I held the backpack in one arm and her in the other, and over her shoulder, I watched the man and his good coat walk out of the building and into the gray afternoon, and he never did look at me, not once, the whole time. That was a year and a half ago. I could tell you it all worked out. That she did the list and got the apartment and the job, and Junie came home, and there's a horse on the ranch now that a 7-year-old is learning to ride, drawing it badly and lovingly in a notebook of her own. I could tell you that. Some of it's even true, and the parts that are true I keep folded up for the people who have earned them. But I promised you at the start that this one wouldn't tie off clean, and I won't break that promise to make you feel better. It's been hard. It's still hard. There are weeks the path looks washed out. There are nights the old fear comes back into her face. A person who's been hunted doesn't stop flinching just because the hunt called off. I've learned that watching her. And me, I'm not the hero of this. I followed a dog into an alley, and then I had to be talked out of doing the selfish thing dressed up as the kind one. And I live with the fact that for one bad hour at a kitchen table, I almost decided a woman shouldn't fight for her own child, and called it love. I went back to my notebook last week like I told you, back to that forward entry, found someone, brought her home. I added a line under it. Took me a while to settle on it. In the end, I just wrote down the thing I actually believe now, the thing the whole business taught me, which isn't the thing they want to hear at the diner. I wrote, wasn't a miracle I gave her, was the one she made me let her go and get. The dog's getting old. He doesn't make it down to the road much anymore. But on cold nights he still gets up sometimes and stands at the front window, looking out at the dark with his one good eye, like he's checking. Like he knows there's always somebody out there in an alley, and the only question that ever mattered was whether you'd stop. I leave the porch light on now, every night. I didn't used to. I don't always know what I'm waiting for.